The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal gardens of Kepler 44b as Elder Zephyr walked slowly through the peaceful paths. His forearms moved gracefully as he tended to the glowing flowers that grew in perfect rows. The Valdorian leader had done this same walk every morning for over 300 years. His translucent skin caught the light, showing the gentle blue blood that flowed beneath. The planet was quiet except for the soft humming of his people as they worked in the fields. The Valdorians had built their entire world around harmony. Their cities were made of living crystal that grew from the ground. Their farms stretched across continents, feeding not just their own people, but several neighboring star systems. They had never known war, never built weapons, never even raised their voices in anger. Elder Zephyr stopped at his favorite spot overlooking the capital city. Thousands of his people moved through the crystal streets below. Their tall, thin bodies swayed as they walked, their movements as graceful as dancers. Children played in the gardens while their parents worked. The elderly shared stories under the shade of massive trees. It was a perfect world, just as it had been for thousands of years. The peace was broken by a sharp sound that cut through the morning air. Elder Zephyr turned toward the communication tower that rose like a silver needle from the center of the city. The sound came again, louder this time. It was the emergency signal, something that had not been heard for over a century. Elder Zephyr's heart began to beat faster. He moved quickly through the gardens, his forearms helping him climb over rocks and fallen logs. Other Valdorians were already rushing toward the communication center. Their faces showed confusion and fear. The emergency signal meant only one thing. Something was coming from space. Inside the communication center, technicians worked frantically at their stations. The room was filled with the soft glow of crystal screens and the quiet hum of machinery. Chief Technician Lyra turned to Elder Zephyr as he entered. Her usually calm face was tight with worry. "Elder, we have detected a large fleet approaching our system," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're still 3 days away, but our sensors show at least 30 ships." Elder Zephyr felt his blood turn cold. "Have they sent any messages? Do we know what they want?" Lyra shook her head. "No communication at all. But Elder, we have identified the ships. They match the descriptions we received from the Galactic Council warnings. They are Krillian warships." The name sent a shiver through everyone in the room. The Krillians were known throughout the galaxy as destroyers. They traveled from system to system, conquering peaceful worlds and taking everything of value. Civilizations had vanished after the Krillians visited their planets. The survivors, if any lived, were taken as slaves to work in the Krillian mines. Elder Zephyr closed his eyes and tried to think. The Valdorians had always relied on their peaceful nature to solve problems. They had never faced anything like this. "What do our defenses look like?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "We have no defenses, Elder," Lyra replied. "Our orbital stations are for research and communication. We have no weapons, no shields, no military ships. The Krillians will destroy us easily." The Elder called for an emergency council meeting. Within an hour, the Crystal Hall was filled with the leaders of every major city on the planet. The hall had been built for celebrations and peaceful discussions. It buzzed with fear and desperate voices. "Could try to negotiate," suggested Council Member Vera from the southern continent. "Perhaps they want only resources. We could offer them what they need and ask them to leave us in peace." "The reports from other worlds say the Krillians do not negotiate," replied Council Member Dex. "They take what they want and destroy the rest. They have nothing they cannot simply take by force." Elder Zephyr stood in the center of the hall, his forearms spread wide for silence. "We have always believed that all intelligent life seeks peace, but these Krillians seem to be different. They appear to enjoy causing pain and destroying beautiful things. Cannot understand them because we have never known such darkness." "Then, what do we do?" asked Council Member Kira. "We cannot fight them. We do not even know how to fight. Our children have never seen violence. Our people have never held weapons." The hall fell silent. Outside, the normal sounds of the city continued. People went about their daily lives, not yet knowing that their world was about to change forever. Children still played in the gardens. Farmers still tended their crops. The crystal buildings still caught the light and made it dance. Elder Zephyr thought of all the beauty that would be lost. The art galleries filled with sculptures that took centuries to grow. The libraries containing the wisdom of thousands of years. The music halls where Valdorian voices created harmonies that could make people weep with joy. All of it would be gone in just a few days. "We must ask for help," he said finally. "Someone in the galaxy must be able to stop the Krillians. We will send out a distress signal to every system we can reach." The council agreed quickly. There was no other choice. Within hours, the communication center was working at full power. The distress signal went out across the galaxy, carried by the fastest communication methods the Valdorians knew. The message was simple and desperate. "Is Elder Zephyr of the Valdorian people on Kepler 4 for Tubi? A Krillian war fleet approaches our world. We are a peaceful people with no weapons or defenses. We have never harmed anyone. We beg for help from any civilization that can hear this message. We have 3 days before they arrive. Please, if anyone can help us, we offer everything we have in return." The message was sent again and again, reaching out to every corner of the galaxy. Most of the signals traveled toward the Galactic Council, a group of peaceful species that worked together to help each other. But the Council was far away, and their own fleets were small and weak compared to the Krillians. Some signals traveled in other directions, toward unknown parts of the galaxy. One signal reached a small yellow star on the edge of a spiral arm. The star was unremarkable, orbited by several planets. The third planet was mostly covered in water, with large land masses and a single small moon. On this planet, in a military station hidden beneath a mountain, computers automatically received the alien distress call. The message was filed with thousands of others, waiting for human operators to review it. The planet was called Earth, and its people had been listening to space for decades, hoping to find other intelligent life. Back on Kepler 4 to be, the Valdorians waited. They had done everything they could. The emergency signal continued to broadcast, sent out over and over into the darkness of space. The Krillian fleet grew closer with each passing hour. Elder Zephyr returned to his crystal garden that evening. The flowers still glowed softly in the fading light. His people still went about their peaceful lives, though now they all knew what was coming. There were no riots, no panic, no violence. Even facing the end of their world, the Valdorians remained true to their nature as he stood among the flowers. Elder Zephyr wondered if their message would reach anyone in time. Somewhere in the galaxy, someone had to care about justice and protecting the innocent. Someone had to be strong enough to stand against the Krillians. He did not know that his message had already reached a species that had spent their entire history learning how to fight. He did not know that humans had been forged by war and shaped by conflict. He did not know that his cry for help had reached the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. The Krillians were coming to destroy a peaceful world, but the humans were coming too, and they were ready for a fight. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking coffee in his small office aboard the UES Defiant when the call came. The ship was on routine patrol near Jupiter, watching for asteroids that might threaten the mining stations. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. The coffee was terrible, but it was hot, and it kept him awake during the long night shifts. The communication officer's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, we're receiving a strange signal. It's not coming from any human. Source, you need to hear this." Jake set down his coffee cup and walked to the bridge. The UES Defiant was not a large ship, but it was tough. Built for patrol work and small conflicts, it had thick armor and weapons designed for fighting pirates and raiders. The crew of 60 men and women had been together for 2 years, and they worked well as a team. "Play the message," Jake ordered. The bridge fell silent as the alien voice filled the air. The translation software worked quickly, turning the strange sounds into English words. The message was desperate and afraid. An entire civilization was about to be destroyed by something called the Krillians. They were begging for help from anyone who could hear them. Jake listened to the message twice. His crew stood quietly, all of them thinking the same thing. This was it. This was first contact with alien life. But instead of a celebration, it was a cry for help. Communications, send this to Admiral Hayes immediately, Jake ordered. Mark it as priority 1 and keep monitoring that signal. I want to know everything about where it's coming from. Within 3 hours, Jake received orders to return to Earth immediately. The used Defiant turned toward home, its engines pushing it faster than usual. Jake spent the trip reading everything the computer could tell him about the alien message. The signal was coming from a star system over 40 light-years away. The aliens called themselves Valdorians, and they seemed to be completely peaceful. Back on Earth, Admiral Lisa Hayes was having the worst day of her career. The alien message had turned the entire military command into chaos. Politicians were asking questions she couldn't answer. Scientists were demanding to study the signal. Everyone had opinions about what humanity should do. Lisa was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had spent 30 years in the military, fighting in the resource wars and helping to build the first Mars colonies. She had seen enough combat to know that war was ugly and expensive. But she also knew that sometimes fighting was the only choice. The meeting room at Space Command was packed with officers and advisors. General Robert Chen from the Army was there. Along with Admiral Patricia Stone from the Navy, Commander Alex Rodriguez had flown in from Mars Command, still wearing his red dust-stained uniform. Signal has been confirmed as genuine, reported. Dr. Susan Park, the head of the Alien Communication Project. The Valdorians are real, and they're in serious trouble. Our computers have analyzed the Krillian ships they mentioned. Based on the descriptions, we're looking at a major military force. General Chen leaned forward. How do we know this isn't some kind of trap? What if these Krillians are trying to trick us into revealing our location? Because the signal is being broadcast to the entire galaxy, Dr. Park replied. This isn't a targeted message. It's a desperate plea for help from anyone who can hear it. Commander Rodriguez spoke up. The real question is whether we have the ability to help them. 40 light-years is a long way. Our fastest ships would take weeks to get there using hyperspace. Admiral Hayes had been quiet during most of the discussion. Now she stood up and walked to the star map on the wall. The question isn't whether we can help them. The question is whether we should. We're ready to announce ourselves to the galaxy as a military power. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what she meant. For decades, humanity had been alone in the universe. They had built their space fleet to protect Earth and the colonies. They had never expected to meet aliens, especially aliens who were already at war. If we don't help them, we might be next, Commander Rodriguez said quietly. These Krillians sound like they enjoy destroying peaceful civilizations. What happens when they run out of easy targets? What happens when they come looking for new worlds to conquer? Admiral Stone nodded. Alex is right. We've spent years preparing for the day when we might meet hostile aliens. Maybe that day is here. Lisa Hayes looked around the room at the faces of her officers. These were good people who had spent their lives protecting humanity. They had all seen war and knew its cost. But they also knew that sometimes the cost of not fighting was even higher. How many ships can we spare? She asked. 3, replied Admiral Stone. The Defiant is already on its way back from Jupiter. The Vanguard is finishing repairs at Luna Station. And the Havoc just completed its shakedown cruise. That's not very many ships to send against a fleet of 30, General Chen observed. Commander Rodriguez smiled grimly. It's not about the number of ships. It's about the people who crew them. Our people have been fighting for survival their entire lives. Earth made us tough. Mars made us tougher. We've never met an enemy we couldn't handle. Lisa Hayes made her decision. We're going to help them. Prepare the 3 ships for immediate departure. I want our best crews on those vessels. I want them loaded with everything we have. Within hours, the orders went out. Captain Jake Morrison received command of the small fleet. The UES Vanguard would be commanded by Captain Nina Wells, veteran of the Mars colonial wars. The heavy cruiser UES Havoc would be led by Captain Ryan Burke, whose aggressive tactics had made him famous during the asteroid belt conflicts. The 3 ships met at Luna Station for final preparations. The crews worked around the clock, loading ammunition, food, and spare parts. The ships were designed for long-range patrol work, but they had never been tested in a real battle against unknown enemies. Sergeant Beth Collins supervised the loading of her Marine unit aboard the Defiant. She was a tough woman from the Chicago slums who had fought in 3 different wars. Her Marines were just as hard as she was, men and women who had volunteered for the most dangerous assignments in the fleet. You think these aliens know how to fight? Asked Corporal Danny Murphy, a young Marine from Boston. Doesn't matter, Beth replied. We know how to fight. That's what counts. Chief Engineer Carlos Martinez was busy checking the Defiant's weapon systems. The ship carried missile launchers, energy cannons, and defensive shields. It wasn't the most advanced technology in the galaxy, but it was built by humans who understood. That equipment had to work when lives depended on it. The reactor is running at full capacity, Carlos reported to Captain Morrison. Weapons are charged and ready. We can fight for hours without resupplying. The 3 ships launched from Luna Station on a cold Tuesday morning. They formed up in a loose formation and engaged their hyperspace drives. The journey to the Valdorian system would take them 2 weeks, pushing their engines to the limit. As they traveled through hyperspace, the crews prepared for battle. They studied the alien signals, trying to understand what they were getting into. They cleaned their weapons and ran combat drills. They wrote letters to their families, just in case. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching the stars stream past. He thought about the Valdorians and their peaceful world. He thought about the Krillians and their reputation for destroying everything they touched. Most of all, he thought about what it meant to be human. Humanity had spent thousands of years learning how to fight. They had fought each other, fought their environment, and fought to survive in the cold emptiness of space. They had never asked to be warriors, but the universe had given them no choice. Now, for the first time, they were going to fight for someone else. They were going to protect a species they had never met on a world they had never seen. Right. It felt like what humans were supposed to do. The 3 ships continued their journey through hyperspace, carrying humanity's first ambassadors to an alien war. Behind them, Earth waited anxiously for news. Ahead of them, the Valdorians continued their desperate broadcasts, hoping someone would come to save them. The Krillians were also traveling through space, confident in their power and certain of their victory. They'd destroyed dozens of worlds and enslaved millions of beings. They'd never met an enemy they couldn't defeat. They were about to meet the humans. The 3 human ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system and immediately went to full alert. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, staring at the tactical display that showed 30 red dots surrounding the peaceful planet below. Krillian fleet was already here, and they were positioning themselves for attack. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Sarah Blake, the communications officer. "Look at the size of those ships." The Krillian vessels were massive, each one 3 times larger than the biggest human warship. They looked like floating cities made of dark metal, bristling with weapons and armor. Their hulls were covered in spikes and jagged edges, designed to look as threatening as possible. These were ships built by a species that loved war and wanted everyone to know it. Captain Morrison to all ships, Jake spoke into his communicator. "Stay in formation, but be ready to move fast. We're outnumbered 10 to 1, so we need to be smart about this." Captain Nina Wells responded from the U.S. Vanguard. "Roger that, Jake. My crew is ready for whatever comes." Captain Ryan Burke's voice crackled over the radio from the heavy cruiser U.S. Havoc. "Those are some ugly ships. I'm looking forward to putting some holes in them." Jake smiled despite the situation. Ryan had always been eager for a fight. "Let's try talking first, Ryan. We might be able to solve this without shooting."
The human
Fleet moved slowly toward the planet, their sensors working overtime to gather information. The Krillian ships had formed a blockade around the world, preventing anyone from escaping. Several orbital stations were already burning, their wreckage floating in space like broken toys. "Sir, I'm picking up a signal from the planet," reported Lieutenant Blake. "It's the Valdorians. They're trying to contact us." The main screen flickered to life, showing the image of a tall, thin alien with translucent skin and 4 arms. Zephyr looked exhausted and frightened, but his eyes showed hope when he saw the human ships. "Thank you for coming, Elder Zephyr," said in heavily accented English. We are so grateful that someone answered our call for help. I am Elder Zephyr of the Valdorian people. We have been waiting for 3 days, afraid that no one would come. Jake stepped forward. I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth ship, Defiant. We received your distress call and came as quickly as we could. What's the situation down there? The Krillians arrived yesterday, Elder Zephyr replied. They have not attacked the planet yet, but they are destroying our space stations and threatening to bombard our cities. We have tried to communicate with them, but they will not listen to reason. Have you tried offering them what they want? Jake asked. Maybe we can negotiate with them. Elder Zephyr's face showed confusion. I do not understand. You came here to fight them, did you not? Your ships carry weapons, your people are soldiers. Jake felt uncomfortable. We came here to help you, but we'd prefer to find a peaceful solution if possible. War should always be the last choice. But the Krillians are evil, Elder Zephyr said, his voice rising. They destroy beautiful things for pleasure. They enslave peaceful peoples. They cannot be reasoned with. The only way to stop them is through force. The conversation was interrupted by a new signal. A massive Krillian battleship moved closer to the human fleet, its weapons powering up. It's the alien face that appeared on the screen was nothing like the gentle Valdorian. War Commander Thax looked like a nightmare made real. With gray skin covered in scars, red eyes, and teeth filed to sharp points. So, the little mammals have come to play, Thax said, in a voice like grinding metal. I am War Commander Thax, of the Krillian Empire. You will leave this system immediately, or we will add your ships to our collection of trophies. Jake straightened his shoulders. I'm Captain Morrison of the United Earth Fleet. We're here to protect the Valdorians. If you leave this system peacefully, there won't be any trouble. Thax laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Protect them? You have 3 tiny ships? We have 30 warships that have conquered 100 worlds. Leave now, and we will let you run home to tell your people what you have seen. We're not leaving, Jake said firmly. The Valdorians are under our protection now. The Krillian commanders. Red eyes narrowed. Then you will die with them. You will destroy your ships, enslave your crews, and add your world to our list of targets. You should have stayed home, little mammals. The communication ended, leaving the human bridge in silence. Jake looked around at his crew, seeing the same expression on every face. They had all heard the threat, and they all knew what it meant. Captain, said Lieutenant Blake quietly, Elder Zephyr is still on the line. Jake turned back to the screen. The Valdorian leader looked even more frightened than before. Captain Morrison, you must leave immediately. The Krillians will destroy you. Your ships are too small, your numbers too few. We cannot ask you to die for us. With respect, Elder Zephyr, that's not your decision to make, Jake replied. We came here to help, and we're not leaving until the job is done. But you will all be killed, Elder Zephyr said desperately. The Krillians are experienced warriors. They've fought thousands of battles. What experience do your people have with war? Jake's crew looked at each other, and several of them actually smiled. Chief Engineer Carlos Martinez spoke up from his station. Elder, with respect, we've been fighting our whole lives. Every human on these ships has seen combat. That's impossible, Elder Zephyr said. Your species looks young. How can you all be veterans of war? Because Earth is a hard world, Jake explained. We've been fighting for survival since the day we were born. Fought each other, fought our environment, and fought to expand into space. War isn't something we choose. Right. It's something we do when we have to. The Valdorian leader shook his head. But violence is wrong. Surely there must be another way. Can't you negotiate with them? Offer them something they want? Some people can't be negotiated with, Jake said sadly. Some people only understand force. The Krillians are like that. They take what they want and destroy everything else. Elder Zephyr was quiet for a long moment. Captain Morrison, I must be honest with you. We hoped that whoever answered our call would be powerful enough to defeat the Krillians, but also wise enough to find a peaceful solution. We did not expect warriors like yourselves. Jake nodded. I understand. You wanted protectors, not fighters. But sometimes the only way to protect something is to fight for it. Oh, the tactical display. The Krillian ships were moving into attack formation. War Commander Thax had given the humans time to leave, but that time was running out. The massive alien warships began to spread out, trying to surround the small human fleet. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Dan Foster from the weapons station, "the Krillians are powering up their main guns. They're getting ready to attack." Jake opened a channel to the other human ships. "All ships, this is Morrison. Combat is about to begin. Remember your training, watch each other's backs, and let's show these aliens what humans can do." "Captain." Wells responded immediately. "Vanguard ready, Jake. My crew is spoiling for a fight." Captain Burke's voice was filled with excitement. "Havoc is locked and loaded. Let's give these ugly bastards something to remember." Zephan on the screen. "Elder, you should take your people to the deepest shelters you have. This is going to get ugly." "Captain Morrison," Elder Zephan said quietly, "I do not understand your species. Seem like good people, but you are eager to fight. How can you be both peaceful and violent?" Jake thought about the question as alarms began to sound throughout the ship. Because sometimes, Elder, the only way to preserve peace is to be ready for war. We don't fight because we want to. We fight because others won't let us live in peace. Communication ended as the first Krillian ship opened fire. Energy bolts streaked across space toward the human fleet. Jake grabbed the nearest handheld as the ship shook from enemy fire. "All hands, battle stations," he announced over the intercom. This is what we came here to do. Let's show the galaxy what Earth's children can accomplish." The battle for the Valdorian system was about to begin. 3 human ships against 30 alien warships. By all logical calculations, the humans should have been destroyed in minutes. But the Krillians had never fought humans before. They were about to learn that logic didn't always apply when dealing with a species that had been forged in the fires of a death world. The first Krillian energy blast hit the UES Defiant's shields and lit up the bridge with red warning lights. Captain Jake Morrison gripped his chair as the ship shook violently. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency, their hands moving, over controls they had practiced with thousands of times. "Shields at 80%, reported Chief Engineer Carlos Martinez. "Integrity. Holding steady." "Return fire," Jake ordered. "Target their lead ship." The Defiant's main cannons fired back, sending bright blue energy beams toward the massive Krillian battleship. The shots hit the alien vessel's armor and exploded in brilliant flashes. To Jake's surprise, the enemy ship actually staggered under. The impact, War-Commander Thax stared at his tactical display in confusion. The human weapons were much more powerful than their small ship suggested. His flagship's armor had actually been damaged by the first exchange of fire. This was not supposed to happen. "All ships concentrate fire on the center vessel." Thax commanded, "Destroy it quickly." 10 Krillian warships turned their weapons toward the UES Defiant. Energy beams and missile volleys streaked through space like deadly rain. But the small human ship was not where they expected it to be. Evasive. "Maneuvers," Jake shouted. "Full power to engines." The Defiant suddenly accelerated and twisted to the left, moving faster than the Krillians thought possible. The alien weapons' fire passed harmlessly through empty space. Before the enemy could adjust their aim, the human ship was already moving. In a different direction, Captain Nina Wells watched the display from the bridge of the UES Vanguard and smiled grimly. "That's Jake for you. Always dancing when he should be standing still." She opened her communications. "All fighter squadrons, launch immediately. Show these aliens how we do things in the Sol system." 20 small fighter craft shot out of the Vanguard's launch bays like angry hornets. They were piloted by men and women who had learned to fly in the asteroid fields around Mars, where a single mistake meant death. Lieutenant Sam Parker led the first squadron, his fighter screaming toward the nearest Krillian cruiser. The Krillian gunners tried to track the human fighters, but the small ships moved like nothing they had ever seen. Sam's fighter pulled a sharp turn that should have killed any living being, the G-forces strong enough to crush bones. But Sam just gritted his teeth and kept flying, his body strengthened by a lifetime of high-gravity training. "Target their weapon systems," Sam called to his squadron over the radio. "Let's cut their claws before they can scratch us." The human fighters swarmed over the Krillian ships, like insects attacking a giant. Their small weapons were not powerful enough to destroy the alien vessels, but they could disable guns and damage sensors. The Krillians found themselves fighting blind and unable to shoot back effectively. Captain Ryan Burke had been waiting for his moment. The UES Havoc was the largest and most heavily armed human ship built for close combat. While the other ships provided distraction, Ryan ordered his ship forward at full speed. Ramming speed, he announced to his crew, "We're going to show these aliens what a real warship looks like." The Havoc charged directly into the center of the Krillian formation, its armor absorbing massive amounts of damage. Warning lights flashed and alarms screamed as enemy fire tore at the ship's hull. But Ryan's crew kept working, even as explosions shook the bridge and smoke filled the air. Hull breaches on decks 3 and 7 reported as damage control. "Officer, we're taking heavy casualties. Keep firing," Ryan ordered, blood running down his face from a cut on his forehead. "We're not done yet." The Havoc's weapons fired at point-blank range into the Krillian ships. At such close distance, even the alien armor could not stop the human weapons. 2 enemy cruisers exploded in balls of fire, their hulls torn apart by the sustained assault. War Commander Thax could not believe what he was seeing. The humans were fighting like madmen, taking damage that should have destroyed them, and still continuing to attack. His own ships were built for overwhelming firepower, not for fighting enemies who seemed to enjoy being shot at. "Why don't they surrender?" he demanded from his bridge crew. "Their ships are damaged. Their people are dying. Why do they keep fighting?" His weapons officer, a scarred veteran of dozens of campaigns, shook his head in confusion. "I don't know, Commander. Most species give up when they take this much damage. These humans seem to fight harder when they're hurt." Even stranger turned when Sergeant Beth Collins led her Marine boarding party into action. While the fighters and ships kept the Krillians busy, Beth and her soldiers used small transport craft to approach a damaged enemy vessel. "Remember, we want to take this ship intact," Beth told her Marines as they prepared to board. "Kill anyone who resists, but try to capture their technology." The Marines cut through the Krillian ship's hull with plasma torches and poured into the alien vessel. The Krillian warriors inside were larger and stronger than humans, but they had never fought an enemy like this before. Corporal Danny Murphy found himself face to face with a Krillian soldier in a narrow corridor. The alien was twice his size, and armed with a massive energy weapon. But Danny had grown up fighting in the streets of Boston, and he knew that size was not everything. Danny rolled under the alien's first shot and came up with his combat knife in his hand. The Krillian tried to bring his big weapon around for another shot, but Danny was already inside his guard. The knife found the gap in the alien's armor, and the Krillian warrior fell with a look of surprise on his face. "These aliens are strong, but slow," Danny reported over his radio, "and they're not used to fighting up close." Beth's Marines fought their way through the ship, room by room and corridor by corridor. The Krillians had superior weapons and armor, but the humans had something the aliens did not understand. They kept fighting even when they were wounded. They helped each other when one fell. They never gave up, no matter how bad things looked. Within an hour, the Marines had captured the entire Krillian cruiser. Beth stood on the alien bridge, looking at the strange controls and displays. Around her, her soldiers were tending to their wounded and securing the prisoners. "Control, this is Collins," she reported to the Defiant. "We have the ship. Krillian crew is neutralized, requesting technical teams to examine their equipment." Back on the main battlefield, the Krillians were learning that fighting humans was not like fighting anyone else. Their usual tactics of overwhelming firepower were not working. The human ships were too fast and too unpredictable. When damaged, they fought harder instead of retreating. Lieutenant Sam Parker's fighter had been hit 3 times, and his cockpit was filled with smoke from damaged electronics. His left arm was broken, and he could barely see through the blood running down his face. But he kept flying, kept shooting, kept fighting. "Sam, get back to the ship," Captain Wells ordered over the radio. "You're too damaged to continue." "Negative." "Captain," Sam replied, wincing as he pulled his fighter into another impossible turn. "I can still fly. I can still fight. These aliens haven't seen anything yet." Sam dove his damaged fighter directly at a Krillian battleship, firing his remaining missiles at the alien vessel's bridge. The explosions lit up space as the enemy ship's command center was destroyed. Sam pulled up at the last second, his fighter. Streaming smoke and sparks, the Krillians began to panic. This was not how battles were supposed to go. The humans should have been destroyed or surrendered by now. Instead, they kept fighting with a ferocity that made no sense. Even their damaged ships continued to fire their weapons. Even their wounded fighters kept attacking. War Commander Thax watched his tactical display as another of his ships exploded. He had started the battle with 30 vessels. Now he had less than 20 that were still able to fight. The humans had only 3 ships, but they were tearing his fleet apart. Commander, his communications officer, called out, "We're receiving surrender requests from several of our ships. Their commanders are asking permission to withdraw." Thax stared at the officer in shock. In all his years of conquest, he had never heard those words. Krillian warriors did not ask to retreat. They fought until they won or died. But these humans had broken something in his fleet's spirit. "All ships maintain formation," Thax ordered. "We are Krillians. We do not run from inferior species." Even as he spoke, Thax was beginning to understand that these humans were not inferior. They were something else entirely. They were a species that had been shaped by war and hardened by conflict. They fought not because they enjoyed it, but because they knew no other way to protect what they valued. The battle continued to rage around the peaceful planet of Kepler-4 for to be. Below, the Valdorians watched in amazement and horror as the small human fleet slowly destroyed the massive Krillian armada. They had never seen such violence, but they were beginning to understand that sometimes violence was the only language that bullies understood. The humans were teaching the galaxy a lesson that would be remembered for centuries. Sometimes the smallest force could win if it refused to give up. Sometimes 3 ships could defeat 30 if they were crewed by people who would rather die than surrender. The Deathworlders had come to save a peaceful civilization, and they were keeping their promise no matter what the cost. The battle ended not with a final explosion, but with silence. War Commander Thax stared at his tactical display, watching the last of his escort ships drift away as burning wreckage. Of his 30 mighty warships, only 7 remained operational, and even those were heavily damaged. His own flagship was missing half its weapons and leaking atmosphere from dozens of hull breaches. The 3 human ships still hung in space around the planet, battered but unbroken. The UES Havoc looked like it had been through a meat grinder, its hull scarred and blackened. The UES Vanguard had lost 2 of its fighter squadrons, but the remaining pilots still circled protectively around the fleet. The UES Defiant, though damaged, continued to aim its weapons at the Krillian survivors. "Commander," his communications officer said quietly, "the humans are broadcasting on all frequencies." Captain Jake Morrison's voice filled the Krillian bridge, calm and steady despite the carnage around them. "War Commander Thax, this is Captain Morrison. Your fleet is broken. Your ships are dying. I'm offering you one chance to leave this system alive. Take your remaining vessels and go. Never return to Valdorian space again." Thax felt something he had never experienced before in his long career of conquest. Fear. Not the quick fear of battle, but the deep, cold fear of meeting something stronger than himself. These humans had fought like demons, refusing to surrender even when facing impossible odds. They had turned his proud fleet into floating scrap metal. "Why?" Thax asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why do you fight so hard for people? You barely know?" Jake's answer came back immediately, "'Cause that's what decent people do. They protect those who can't protect themselves." Around the Krillian bridge, the surviving crew members looked at their commander with hollow eyes. They had all heard stories of the great conquests, the easy victories over peaceful worlds. None of those stories had prepared them for this. None of them had warned that somewhere in the galaxy lived a species that fought like the universe itself, had forged them for war. "Signal the retreat," Thax ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. "All remaining ships, withdraw from the system immediately." The 7 surviving Krillian vessels turned away from the planet and engaged their hyperspace drives. Within minutes, they were gone, carrying with them tales that would change how the galaxy viewed both humanity and warfare itself. Captain Morrison opened a channel to the planet below. Elder Zephin appeared on the screen, his forearms trembling. With emotion, behind him, other Valdorians were emerging from their underground shelters. Looking up at the sky where the human ship still orbited protectively, "Captain Morrison," Elder Zephin said, his voice filled with wonder. "You did it. You actually defeated them. In all our history, no one has ever stood up to the Krillians successfully." Jake smiled tiredly. "We told you we'd protect you, Elder. Humans keep their promises." "But the cost," Elder Zephin said, looking at the damaged human ships. "So many of your people died for us, people you had never met before today." Jake looked around his bridge at his surviving crew members. They were bandaged and exhausted, but their eyes showed satisfaction. They had done their job. They had saved an entire civilization from destruction. "Elder, that's what we do," Jake said simply. "When someone calls for help, we answer. When someone needs protection, we provide it. That's what makes us human." Over the next several hours, rescue teams from both fleets worked together to help survivors. The Valdorians had medical technology far more advanced than anything on Earth, and they eagerly shared it with the wounded human sailors and Marines. Dr. Kate Sullivan, the chief medical officer from the Defiant, worked alongside Valdorian healers to save lives from both sides. "Your people are remarkable," said Dr. Vila, a Valdorian physician, as she watched Kate treat a wounded Krillian prisoner with the same care she gave to human patients. "You fight with incredible violence, but you also show great mercy." Kate looked up from her patient, a young Krillian soldier who had been badly burned when his ship exploded. "Violence and mercy aren't opposites. Sometimes you have to fight to protect the innocent, but once the fighting is over, you help everyone." "Who needs help?" The Valdorian doctor was quiet for a long moment. "We have never understood this. Our people have always believed that violence is evil, that peaceful solutions are always better. But you showed us that sometimes peace can only be preserved through strength." Captain Morrison met with Elder Zephin on the planet's surface 3. Days after the battle, the Valdorian capital was a beautiful city of crystal spires and floating gardens. Jake walked through streets filled with aliens who stopped to stare at him with mixtures of gratitude and fear. Elder Zephin led Jake to a garden overlooking the city. The two leaders sat beside a fountain that played music as the water fell, creating harmonies that human ears found hauntingly beautiful. "Captain Morrison," Elder Zephin said, "my people have been discussing what happened here. We are struggling to understand your species. You seem to be capable of both great violence and great kindness." "How is this possible?" Jake thought carefully. Before answering, "Elder, humans didn't choose to be warriors. Our planet made us that way. Earth is a hard world where everything tries to kill you. It's the weather, the animals, the diseases, even the plants. We learned to fight because fighting was the only way to survive. But you also chose to help us," Elder Zephin pointed out. "Risked your lives for people you had never met, because we also learned that working together makes us stronger," Jake replied. "Humans fight when we have to, but we prefer to build and protect and create. We came here not because we wanted a war, but because we couldn't stand by and watch innocent people be destroyed." Elder Zephin was quiet for a long time, watching his people go about their daily lives in the city below. "Captain Morrison, we have something to offer you. Our agricultural technology could help feed your colonies. Our medical knowledge could heal diseases that your people still struggle with. In exchange, would your people be willing to protect our worlds if the Krillians return?" Jake smiled. "Elder, we'd be honored to be your allies. But you should understand something. If we become friends, we'll expect you to stand up for yourselves too. Not with weapons necessarily, but with strength and courage the galaxy needs. Good people who are willing to fight for what's right." "We are learning," Elder Zephin said softly. "Your example has taught us that sometimes the greatest kindness is the willingness to fight for others." The formal alliance between Earth and the Valdorian worlds was signed a week later. Captain Morrison and his fleet prepared to return home, leaving behind monitoring stations and a promise to return if needed. The three ships looked even more battered than before, but their crews were proud of what they had accomplished. As the human fleet prepared to depart, messages were already spreading across the galaxy. The story of the battle at Kepler 44 to be traveled faster than the ships that fought it. Peaceful species learned that they now had protectors. Aggressive species learned that there were beings in the universe who would fight back. On distant worlds, beings who had never heard of Earth suddenly knew the name human. Some spoke it with gratitude, others whispered it with fear. All of them understood that the galaxy had changed forever. The Krillian survivors reached their home worlds and told their story to the Imperial Council. The tale of 30 warships, defeated by 3 smaller vessels, seemed impossible, but the evidence was undeniable. The Krillian Empire quietly removed several peaceful worlds from their target lists, deciding that some conquests were not worth the risk. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant as the 3 ships engaged their hyperspace drives for the journey home. Through the viewports, he could see the peaceful planet they were leaving behind, its crystal cities sparkling in the light of its yellow sun. Captain asked Lieutenant Sarah Blake, "Do you think we did the right thing?" Jake looked at his communications. "Officer," this young woman who had helped translate the first alien message that brought them here. "Sarah, we answered a call for help from people who needed us. We protected the innocent and defeated the bullies. If that's not right, then I don't know what is." The 3 ships disappeared into hyperspace, carrying with them the knowledge that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. Behind them, the Valdorians began the long process of rebuilding, but now they rebuilt with hope instead of fear. Across the galaxy, other peaceful species who had received the Valdorian distress call began sending their own messages toward the small yellow star on the edge of the spiral arm. They had heard that Deathworlders lived there, beings who fought like the universe had forged them for war, but who used that strength to protect the innocent. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy not as conquerors, but as guardians. Age of human expansion into space would be remembered not for the worlds they claimed, but for the worlds they saved.